So what we're looking at here is a river, a raging river that's reached flood stages. And that's what I wanted to talk to you today about: home ownership and knowing your property and dealing with flood situations. So stay tuned, we got more information coming your way. Okay, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Dream Homes. And today we're going to talk about flooding. I do try to do some education to help homeowners avoid problems, and one of them is flooding. And we're going to go to my hometown of Norfolk, Nebraska, and I just want to I come from one of these places where a lot of people mispronounce the name, or maybe they don't. But I'll tell you how the town gets its name. So here you see this river right here that's coming along here. That's the Elkhorn River. Now, if I zoom in a little bit closer, you're going to see how the river also takes this little tributary right here. That is also the Elkhorn River, but that is the North Fork of the Elkhorn River, and that's how the town gets its name. Originally, it was believed it was named after the North Fork of the Elkhorn River, North Fork. But a lot of people in the town call the community as Norfolk, Norfork, even though there's no second R. A lot of native residents call it Norfolk. I've been gone for long enough. I lived there the first 15 years of my life. I tend to call it Norfolk, so my apologies to anybody in the town who doesn't like the way I pronounce it, but that's the way it is. So we're going to come back to this in a minute. So I would like to start out by saying that the intent of this video is about flooding awareness. Whether you're buying a home and some property, or if you own a home or property, it's important to talk about flooding. First of all, I want to make it clear that I'm not an expert. I am not a civil engineer who specializes in floods and flood control, nor am I a soil engineer as they're known, or they're also known as geotechnical engineers, nor am I an environmental scientist. I'm just a guy who's made plenty of mistakes in home ownership, and I'd like to spare you from making the same mistakes. But when it comes to home ownership, I like to call in the experts before I build or buy. First, we're going to talk about your foundation of your home. And it's possible that you may not live in a flood zone or a floodplain, but your property could still be prone to some regular flooding. So you need to know your foundation and the amount of serious damage that can happen due to water encroachment or flooding. Foundation problems are some of the costliest problems that you can have in real estate. They can bankrupt you and cause you to lose your whole life savings. So it's important to know about the ground on which your home will rest. For example, many home buyers are not prepared for all the complications of hillside living, including erosions, gullies, mud flows, and or landslides caused by intense winter rains. Soil testing and the resulting maintenance recommendations could help to make potential or current homeowners aware of steps to help safeguard their homes. So I want to give a shout out to this gentleman right here. He's known as the Essential Craftsman. That's his YouTube channel name. This particular video is well worth watching. Geotechnical Report. He's building a spec house, and he's building on a hillside, and the amount of he's got to do all kinds of things before he even begins to build to help prevent water damage. And he goes into great detail why it's so important to know your foundation and to make adequate provisions for water runoff and erosion and things like that. And he can explain it much better than I can, so shout out to him. And oh, by the way, I am a Patreon sponsor of his. I like his channel. He does a lot of things about home building and home maintenance. He also does some things I'm not particularly keen on, like he talks about blacksmithing. So if you're into metal forging and stuff like that, which I'm not really interested in, but he's got plenty of other very interesting videos that I favored his. I subscribe to his channel, and I like his videos enough that I sponsor him. So just if he's watching this, I'm one of your sponsors. I'm just letting you know I appreciate your videos. So if you're considering buying property or existing structure or house, or you want to build a house or structure in a place that a home builder or home contractor expresses concern, or you just want to be reassured that you will have a solid, problem-free soil foundation under your structure, you should seriously consider having the soil tested at the location site, at the build site, by a soil engineer who is registered and licensed by the state, the county, or province you live in. A soil engineer can analyze the soil structure of a proposed building or construction site and can conduct a soil analysis to learn of any potential hazards that could affect your home and investment over both the short and long term. And typically the cost is fairly reasonable, given the potential risks. And here we see, we're looking at pictures of soil engineers doing their job. It's the same as if you're buying an existing house, you want to hire an expert to come in, a building inspector, to look at the house to make sure that it was built correctly and things like that. You can save yourself so much money if you take these precautionary steps up front. So it's something I absolutely endorse and highly recommend. So let's talk about floods. And there's different kinds of floods, and we'll get into that. So what causes floods? Well, the most common cause of flooding in residential areas where you have a lot of homes, it's heavy rainstorms, and that's when the capacity of the storm sewers is, they get to overflowing, and that backs up into the streets and into basements of homes. And this can occur anywhere, whether or not you're in an area located in a floodplain or flood zone or not. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a video here. This is a flash flood that's happening in the middle of the desert. You see how dry everything is? And here you have, that's a river, right? No, it's not a river. This is just water flowing over land, dry, arid desert. And it happens when if you get enough water that happens, you're going to see in the background here, this is a drone taking these pictures. See the mountains in the background? Well, they probably had a ton of rain up in those mountains. And where's that water going to go? It's going to cross the desert. And water seeks the lowest ground. So it's just going to find its way across. And when you get so much water happening in one area, there's nowhere for the water to go. It's whether you're in a city, once those storm drains fill up, it's got to go somewhere. So it always seeks the lowest ground, and in this case, this water is just flooding across the middle of the desert. So if you can have a flood in a desert, you can have a flood anywhere. Now, floods can also be caused by highly accelerated snowmelt, as they were in several states this year in the U.S., and particularly in Nebraska. And that's why we're looking at my hometown, because they, in March of this year, about a month after the making of this, sorry, a month before, previous to the making of this video, they had a major flood. And this was the second major flood they've had in the last 10 years. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, one of the things they do is build dams, and but they're also charged with the responsibility of like river flow, and they get heavily involved in flood issues. They said that much of the water that caused the Midwest flooding in March came from rain and melting snow that flowed into the Missouri River. And for those of you who don't know, the Missouri River is one of the biggest rivers in this country. It flowed in the Missouri River downstream of all the dams it controls. At the same time, massive amounts of water was filling the reservoirs, and some had to be released. What I want to do here is I'm going to zoom in here, and my town, they had a flood control project that they built in the late 1960s. And I actually was old enough to be around when this was being built. I actually remember this. So we're going to zoom in here closer, and you're going to see, so here's the north fork of the Elkhorn River. And see, I'm going to zoom in real close here. Okay, and see, this is where the flood control starts. You can kind of see right along in here and here. These are just natural banks. And we're going to be talking about floodplains here and eventually. Everything here would be a floodplain, and I'm going to get more into that later. This is all like a floodplain area. This is very small, and this is maybe 10 feet across at most, okay? It's very small. So we're going to come up like this, and we're going along the flood control, and there's a point to this here in a second, but well, here, let me take my little guy. I'm going to put him down here. I want you to see how big this flood control is. Okay, now look at that. Yeah, so maybe it's longer. Maybe that's 20 feet wide. So you see these high banks right here? These are at least 25 feet high. So from here to over here is at least 100 yards, or about 91 meters. It's quite wide, okay, and it's also quite high. This is at least 25 feet high, okay. So in other words, this can contain a lot of flooding water. Now let's go back out of here, and we're going to move on further. And there's a point to all this here, so while I'm showing you flood control, I want to show you the extensive nature of this flood. So here we have, I'm going to show you exactly where we are again. So this is on Norfolk Avenue, okay? And we look to the south, and look at how dry this is. Look at all this, how, I mean, this is just bone dry. It's got this little tiny creek flowing through here. Now, let's take a look at the flood video. Okay, so this right here is we're looking at the exact same spot as this is. Look at how completely full it is, and compare that to that. This year's floods in Nebraska tore out major highways, a myriad of county roads, bridges, and dirt roads. They were all completely destroyed. Railroad lines and levees, they've been wrecked. Thousands of homes and businesses have been ruined. Thousands of residents of small towns, they've been evacuated from their homes and were forced to be living in shelters. There were lots of animals that were killed in this flooding, livestock. And the flooding's still going on as more storms continue to drop rain on the Midwestern United States. So, one of the things I want to show you right here, this is a highway. This is a highway that's crossing and it's being completely flooded. It's just astounding the amount of damage that has been occurring. This particular gentleman, and I'll include his YouTube channel in here, shot this with a drone, and the thing is, this occurred over hundreds of miles. This is not just one small area. This is following. This particular event is part of the Elkhorn River, which we were talking about. But there were flooding on plenty of rivers, on the Missouri, on the Niobrara. So they're not they're not isolated events. Here we have another highway shot. See, this is all these roads are going to be completely trashed. They're gone. They're completely ruined. Here's another shot of a highway that is essentially trash. This is where you see these waterfalls. The water is falling right over the edge of the highway, and all this road work has to be rebuilt. I mean, these are highways. The gentleman who filmed this got this great shot of this pickup truck trying to make its way through the water. Why people try to ford their way through water, flooding waters, I have no idea. It's a great way to ruin your engine. Um, a lot of people in pickup trucks and SUVs think that they they drive by a different set of rules and think that the weather won't affect their vehicle. And that's why in snowstorms, what do you see more of anything else off the road? Pickup trucks and SUVs, because they go zooming by you at 60, 75 miles an hour, and eventually they hit a patch of ice and they're off the road. Here's a cow gets stuck in the mud, and spoiler alert, they save the cow. But this is the kind of things that happens with flooding. Look at how the highway is just completely ruined. Just, like smashed up, wrecked. That's what flooding will do. More cattle looking for higher ground. Horses. Total devastation. Highway repairs already beginning immediately after in some areas. Railroads being wrecked and ruined, and they have to repair those everywhere. Vehicles, damaged grain mills. I like this video because it demonstrates how foolish people can be. Here's a guy up on top of this bridge trying to tell people to stop. Don't go any further. You're going to drive into water. See him holding up his hands? Don't go any further. But look at all these cars that just ignore him and they just keep driving through. You realize if you don't know it by now, if you drive into water that's more than, say, 2 feet high, let's say I want to say as a rule of thumb, a foot high, you stand a good chance of wrecking your engine. And this water's, what is the big deal? Why didn't they just stop and turn around? They could have even crossed the road, crossed through the grass and gone back. Nothing is it's not worth getting through this water. And they're lucky because the water here it's not that deep. It's probably right here. It's probably about 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches, could be even a foot. But you shouldn't be driving in this stuff. You've got to learn stop your car immediately when you see this kind of stuff ahead and go back. The fourth National Climate Assessment, which was prepared by the U.S. Global Change Research Program, wasn't just about the most recent one. It wasn't just talking about all of the forest fires that seem to burn millions of acres every year in British Columbia and Washington and Oregon and California. And it wasn't just talking about Florida falling victim to hurricanes. It also focused on the nation's agricultural Great Plains states, like Nebraska, which is already seeing wetter springs and hotter summers. So this quote comes from the fourth National Climate Assessment. It says, quote, "The impacts of climate change are already being felt in communities across the country. More frequent and intense extreme weather and climate-related events, as well as changes in average climate conditions, are expected to continue to damage infrastructure, ecosystems, and social systems that provide essential benefits to communities. Future climate change is expected to further disrupt many areas of life exacerbating existing challenges to prosperity posed by aging and deteriorating infrastructure, stressed ecosystems, and economic inequality. Even Nebraska farmers, and that's an end quote there, even Nebraska farmers are starting to wake up to the fact that this can't be just coincidence. In a 10-year period, they've had two quote unquote 100-year floods. Florida's seen this all the time. The intensity of the hurricanes is increasing with regularity. So climate change, people are starting to really wake up, even the Midwestern farmers, that climate change is real. So something else when you consider when buying real estate or property or a house, say, and is where you're buying it. And specifically, I'm talking about floodplains. First, what is a floodplain? Well, a floodplain is an area of land, to put it as simply as possible, that is next to or joined with a stream or river, which stretches from the banks of its channel to the base of the enclosing valley walls, and which experiences flooding during periods of large volume water discharge. Now, as Brian Romans, a science editor for Wired, wrote in an article I will post a link to in the show notes, he says, floodplains are not just regions that just happen to be adjacent to rivers. They exist because of river processes. Floodplains don't simply experience periodic flooding, they are the result of periodic flooding. The very process that creates habitable and agriculturally fertile areas near a source of water is the same process that can devastate a nation. So, floodplains develop when the rising waters of a flooding river overtops its banks, and the material being transported, typically finer material like clay and or silt, is deposited. So those clay and silt deposits that occur in each flooding event, countless flooding events, over many thousands to hundreds of thousands of years, slowly builds a floodplain. So the main point is that flooding creates floodplains. And it's important to understand the consequences owning a property or living in a floodplain or building a house in a floodplain. If you buy a house or land that is located in a floodplain, this can mean added costs and additional restrictions for the homeowner, even if the property or surrounding the area has never been flooded. You really need to do your research when you buy land in a floodplain, and I can't cover everything, but I'll tell you a couple things. Here's what's not covered by flood insurance. 1, damage caused by earth movement, even if the earth movement is caused by the flood. That's not covered. 2, additional living expenses, such as temporary housing while the building is being repaired or unable to be occupied. Now think about that. You are in charge of paying for your hotel or renting an apartment or whatever, and if there are 1,000 homes that have been ruined by the flood, how quickly do you think they're going to be able to fix your home? Even if you're covered by the insurance, you still have to pay for a place to live. You're probably looking at 1 to 2 years before your home gets fixed. That's money that's coming out of your pocket. 3, loss of use or access to the insured property. 4, financial losses caused by business interruptions. So if you have a business, and if your business is out for a year, what are you going to do? So there's a lot more that I haven't even mentioned there that's not covered by flood insurance. You need to really think hard before you build a property in a flood zone, a floodplain, and you need to think hard before you buy an existing property that's located in a flood zone or a floodplain. you're going to have to face, deal with a lot of those circumstances on your own. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you. I know we usually talk about fantasy dream homes, but there are certain times when I really want you to be aware that there are all types of things you need to know to be a smart home buyer, homeowner, to be prepared, and you have to protect yourself. Knowledge is king. The more you know going into a situation, the more you can be prepared for any calamity that may result. So, if you like this channel, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button on the video. And if you would like, after you subscribe, you'll be given an option to click the bell for notifications. There's a little bell icon. Click that bell. It'll let you know every time we come out with a new video. And as always, we thank you so much for watching. We look forward to see you on the next video. Keep smiling. Bye-bye.